Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Robert Adams, and joining us this evening from the Royal Australian Navy is Captain Nick Tate. This evening, we warmly welcome the family of Flying Officer John Anthony Howard Wilkinson, whose story will be told shortly. We also warmly welcome the delegation representing the Regional Army Reserves Induction Company. And as always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you are able, I now invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. For those requiring a seat, you may now be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians to understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us during war and on operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Flying Officer John Anthony Howard Wilkinson. John Wilkinson was born on the 23rd of March 1924 at Hill Avenue in Canberra, South Australia. He was the second eldest of 6 children born to labourer Peter Howard Wilkinson and schoolteacher Eileen Teresa Coulshaw. When John was 10, his parents divorced. Eileen and the children, Moy, John, Bill, Betty, Phil, Dom, and baby Bob, moved to Dulwich Avenue in Adelaide. The house was owned by Eileen's sister Agnes, who rented the property to Eileen until she could afford to purchase it for herself. John attended Sacred Heart College in Adelaide, and at the age of 16, joined the Air Force Cadets. As a teenager, John was renowned by his siblings and friends for being a quiet but great leader, having more gravitas and natural leadership than the average person. He went on to hold a brief apprenticeship as a printer before working as a clerk at Elders Trustee and Executor Company in the centre of Adelaide. John enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force on the 23rd of May 1942 at No. 5 Recruiting Centre in Adelaide. Initially mustered as aircrew with guard duties, he began training at No. 4 Initial Training School in the seaside town of Victor Harbour. Recruits were housed at the Mount Bracken Estate, a grand 38-room residence overlooking the bay. Alongside basic training, enlistees were also carefully screened to allocate them to aircrew roles. And on the 15th of August 1942, John was mustered as a pilot. After completing his initial training, John spent the remainder of 1942 undergoing elementary and intermediate flight training in Victoria and South Australia. He successfully completed his flying course on the 5th of March 1943, and 6 days later was promoted to sergeant. John embarked for the United Kingdom in April 1943, arriving in England in early June. He was promoted to flight sergeant in September 1943. In January 1944, he was commissioned and promoted to pilot officer. After attending heavy conversion units where he learned to operate the Lancaster bombers, John joined No. 463 Squadron on the 8th of June 1944. The squadron formed part of RAF Bomber Command's 5 Group, conducting nighttime bombing raids over Germany. Flying with Bomber Command was dangerous work, with 44% of airmen killed. These high rates of loss were daunting, particularly as men had to complete 30 missions to complete a tour of operations. These risks were particularly true for John's squadron, No. 463, as No. 463 Squadron sustained the highest loss rate in proportion to size of any of the Australian bomber squadrons. John was promoted to flying officer on the 17th of July 1944, having acted in the rank since late June. In just under 2 months, he flew 15 missions with No. 463 Squadron, halfway to completing his full tour of operations. On the night of the 28th of July 1944, John left RAF Waddington in Lincolnshire at approximately 10:24 p.m, the pilot of a Lancaster ME 615. The aircraft was part of a bombing raid on Stuttgart, an industrial and rail centre in southwest Germany. Bomber Command had launched a series of attacks on the city in late July, with this raid being the last of 3 in quick succession. Lancasters from No. 463 Squadron joined other RAF squadrons in bombing the city around midnight. After takeoff, nothing was heard from John's aircraft. He and his crew were declared missing and his family informed by telegram. 6 months later, his family received a second telegram. John was now presumed killed in action. The news of John's death shocked his siblings in Adelaide. Younger sister Betty explained later that, "I suppose I didn't think that he wouldn't come home." Mother Eileen hadn't shared her daughter's uncertainty. Bob, the youngest of the Wilkinson children, recalled that after John left for the war, Mum said a few times to me she knew she'd never see him again. It was not until after the war ended that details of John's fate were uncovered. While flying over German-occupied France after the raid, the returning Lancasters were intercepted by German night fighters. 39 Lancasters from 103 Squadron RAF were lost, along with John's Lancaster, which was shot down close to the German-French border. The aircraft crashed into dense forest outside Rebach-les-Biches in northeastern France. All 7 aircrew, including Flying Officer John Wilkinson, were killed instantly. He was 20 years old. Irene and Joseph Grebel of nearby Montbron witnessed the aircraft being shot down. Joseph cycled through the night to reach the crash site ahead of the Germans. At the scene, he recovered identification paperwork from the bodies of the aircrew, including a handwritten note with John's name, rank, and serial number. This scrap of paper made its way back to John's family in Adelaide, beginning a decades-long connection between the two families that continues into the present. John's remains were initially buried alongside his crew members at a communal grave in Rebach-les-Biches Communal Cemetery. On the 30th of June 1950, all 7 remains were exhumed and reinterred at Charleroi War Cemetery. Their names are also listed on the International Bomber Command Centre Memorial in Lincoln, England. In 2004, the community of Rebach-les-Biches unveiled a memorial in honour of John's Lancaster crew. The memorial contains the names of each of the men, along with the inscription, "In homage to the crew of a Lancaster bomber of the 463rd Squadron, shot down in the night of the 28th of July, 1944. The second inscription at the base of the memorial simply reads, "Died for our freedom." John's name is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flying Officer John Anthony Howard Wilkinson, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
I now invite you to please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.